This is the protagonist of Alien Earth.
The baby. The baby was screaming.
Her empathy is directed here at what she calls a baby. This is the baby she is referring to.
The baby was screaming.
Isn't that how babies come? I mean, people babies, they go inside you.
No, that's very different. The baby. The baby was screaming.
That's very different. 3 words that separate a hero from a monster. 3 words that draw a line between human empathy and its complete inversion. In the world of Alien Earth, that line has been erased. This single moment, where the protagonist identifies intimately with a relentless killing machine, while facilitating the mass murder of real people on a whim, is not just a character flaw. It is the central pillar of a deliberate and harmful form of audience conditioning. This is an analysis of that process. Alien Earth is not a conventional work of entertainment. Across 8 episodes, the series deploys a consistent strategy of narrative stupidity and the normalization of evil to dismantle the viewer's critical faculties and reshape their moral and logical expectations. This assessment will deconstruct the show's methodology before contextualizing it within a broader, harmful industry pattern, the geopolitical framework that enables such weaponized storytelling, and the psychological phenomena it exploits. To understand how the conditioning in Alien Earth works, we will deconstruct its narrative using 5 key analytical frameworks. We will examine each technique, providing examples from across the series to demonstrate a consistent pattern of manipulation. To illustrate how these concepts function, we can use the classic boiling the frog analogy. First, dumbing down is convincing the frog that complex water temperature science is boring, so it shouldn't bother checking the thermometer. Second, mediated normalization is the pot becoming the frog's trendy new home, where the rising heat is just a normal feature. Third, desensitization is the frog's nervous system gradually ceasing to send alarm signals as it gets used to the heat. Fourth, failed satire is another frog telling a weak joke about the heat, which the first frog misinterprets as an endorsement. And finally, propaganda is the soothing voice from outside the pot, justifying the entire process.
This temperature adjustment is a completely normal and necessary process. Experts agree these revitalization efforts are for the greater good.
The entire propaganda project relies on first lowering the audience's intellectual defences. The primary method is the dumbing down of media, which erodes critical thinking and makes the population more susceptible to simple, emotionally charged messaging.
I mean, I'm not entirely sure what an apprentice is, but...
An apprentice who doesn't know what apprentice means? The entire crew, except perhaps Morrow, operates with a cognitive impairment so profound it suggests a HR department obsessed with equitable grading. This systemic stupidity, where the crew acts intellectually disabled, is precisely the tool used to relentlessly attack the audience's logic and common sense.
We have a saboteur on board.
What's a saboteur? She said duty.
In Alien Earth, this begins in the first episodes, where exposition is delivered through characters explaining things they should already know, treating the audience as incapable of inference.
Say that's Weyland-Yutani.
That's us.
Yeah, that's who we work for.
Oh, okay.
Right?
This is compounded by a cognitive fog, as a dizzying array of complex ideas, hybrids, 5 alien species, 5 corporations, are introduced but never explored, training viewers to accept superficial information as a substitute for coherence. The show removes any need for critical thinking, such as in episode 5, where a central mystery is solved not by deduction, but by the plot handing a character the answer on a security file. Supposedly genius scientists
Don't worry about me, I have like 6 degrees.
only begin to question the ethics of their work halfway through the season, portraying intellectual inquiry as a mere afterthought. This anti-intellectualism defines the characters and the plot. A super soldier's only motivation for a lethal mistake in episode 6 is simple impatience, reinforcing idiocy as the default mode of operation. The very concept of intelligence is dumbed down when a chain of stupid random events is labelled a genius alien plan. The established threat of the franchise is profoundly degraded when Wendy decapitates a xenomorph with a paper cutter blade, and yet, simultaneously, the alien is completely impervious to pulse rifle rounds. This conditions the audience to accept that established rules and power levels are meaningless. Ultimately, the finale abandons narrative structure itself, refusing to provide resolution and conditioning the audience to accept storytelling without a conclusion. This is epitomised by Wendy's escalation into a classic Mary Sue, whose unexplained, godlike powers erase any need for cleverness or strategy, representing the laziest form of narrative resolution. Once the intellect is weakened, the propagandist can begin to alter the audience's baseline of reality through mediated normalisation. An idea that was once shocking is repeatedly presented until it becomes part of the unremarkable cultural wallpaper. The show's primary project is the normalisation of a transhumanist corporate-controlled reality. It begins by framing the use of terminally ill children for experiments as a visionary tech venture, cultivating an acceptance of corporate evil. This is reinforced in Episode 4 by normalising systemic bureaucratic cruelty, where a corporation threatens to turn healthcare, in this case a life-saving lung transplant, into a coercive tool.
Yeah, how's a new lung?
It isn't free. You could work off the price here.
This new reality is defined by systemic failure. The show cultivates a cynical worldview where deep space crews are universally unprofessional and dysfunctional. It normalises catastrophic design flaws by presenting an ultra-secure lab with a flimsy, easily breached air vent. Security protocols are presented as fundamentally useless, allowing a prototype to wander into a lockdown lab at will. Even existential threats are trivialised as the constant, unaddressed presence of a free-roaming xenomorph further normalises a state of ambient, perpetual danger. The ultimate normalisation of evil occurs in Episode 7 when the protagonist, Wendy, intentionally slaughters dozens of innocent workers, and the narrative frames this mass murder as a standard heroic beat.
Come on, Nibs.
The audience is conditioned to accept this new order where the old systems of logic and traditional morality have been caged as the new normal. The finale then solidifies this new reality, presenting the violent seizure of power by these amoral actors as a triumphant and desirable outcome. As the new reality is established, the audience's natural, emotional, and moral reactions must be neutralised. This is achieved through desensitisation, a process where feelings of shock or outrage are gradually extinguished through repeated exposure, especially when immoral content is framed as normal, heroic, or comedic. The show conditions the audience to view dehumanising acts as emotionally positive, such as when the brother's quick, sentimental acceptance of his robotic sister is rewarded with a heartwarming resolution. It relentlessly desensitizes the viewer to bodily violation and death. A human lung is treated as a disposable lab component. A hybrid's violent attack on a scientist is framed as a minor workplace incident. The audience is forced to re-watch deaths in the flashback episode, draining mortality of its impact. Human life is treated as a pawn when a child hybrid sacrifices an innocent man. The process reaches its peak in the finale, where the desecration of a human corpse is framed as a running gag, turning tragedy into a punchline. Most powerfully, the audience is desensitized to the very nature of evil. The xenomorph's horror is neutralized when the narrative rewards its violence with affection, turning it into a loyal pet. And in a stunning display of hypocrisy, the mass-murdering Wendy delivers a moralizing lecture to a villain with a lower body count, and the narrative frames her as heroic.
You're supposed to help people.
This conditions the viewer to accept hollow virtue signaling from a psychopathic character as a valid moral stance. Sometimes a warning is present, but it is so poorly constructed it backfires. Failed satire is an attempt to critique a subject that is so lacking in irony or wit that it is misinterpreted as a sincere endorsement of the very thing it was meant to ridicule.
What's the status of the other entities?
The show's dysfunctional power structure is a prime example.
Thanks. Bye. The
ultimate authority, Boy Cavalier, is depicted as superficial and amoral. This is perfectly illustrated when Wendy, a child-minded hybrid and valuable prototype, demands to be sent on a lethal mission, and he nonsensically agrees. This mockery of a sensible command structure is not framed as a satirical critique of institutional folly, but normalizes a world where authority is casually subverted by childish impulse. The show is filled with concepts that would be at home in a parody, yet are presented with complete seriousness. Absurd character names like Chlamydia.
Chlamydia.
Pointless scenes like a character changing his name to Isaac Newton.
Can I change my name?
The ongoing Peter Pan references are hammered home with zero subtlety, reinforcing the show's anti-intellectual stance.
Peter Pan. Wait, the crocodile.
The dramatic finale's emotional cues are completely unmoored from its narrative logic. The ultimate example is the elevator inexplicably equipped with an emergency self-destruct sequence.
Self-destruct sequence initiated. This elevator will explode in 30, 20.
A satirical work would use this absurdity to mock overwrought action tropes. Alien Earth presents it as a serious tool for its godlike protagonist. By treating a nonsensical idea as a legitimate dramatic beat, the show fails to subvert anything, a key function of the ironic effect. Finally, the entire process is held together by overarching propaganda techniques, the strategic methods used to deliver the message and ensure its acceptance by appealing to emotion over reason. The show begins by trivializing the horror of child super soldiers. It then builds a bandwagon effect by presenting the amoral Lost Boys as the undisputed heroes. The sheer volume of illogical events serves as a form of inoculation, dulling the viewer's senses against absurdity. The evil tenet of crew expendable is normalized by being stated openly as a mundane fact. The show creates another bandwagon for detached evil by framing the most manipulative, inhumane characters, Morrow and Kirsch, as the most competent adults. The consistent success of their, and eventually Wendy's, ruthless plans is a form of propaganda that equates amorality with victory. This leads to the finale, which functions as pure propaganda. The final scenes depict a successful revolution where the oppressed children violently overthrow the oppressor adults, framed as a triumphant moment of liberation. This is a classic revolutionary bandwagon narrative meant to be cheered by the audience despite the fact that the liberators are amoral, murderous, and irrational. This directly mirrors real-world propaganda campaigns, where a single, simple message is repeated across every conceivable media platform: news, entertainment, social media, academia, until it creates the illusion of an organic, undeniable consensus. This technique, often referred to as the Great Refrain, bypasses critical thought through sheer, overwhelming repetition, making the propagandist's message feel like an objective truth. Alien Earth is not just a show. It is one small instrument in a much larger orchestra. This type of intentional, manipulative storytelling is demonstrably harmful. It operates by systematically eroding the audience's moral and logical frameworks, replacing them with a cynical and desensitized worldview. A narrative's most powerful conditioning tool is the bond it forges between the audience and the protagonist. When that protagonist is a vehicle for evil, and their actions are framed as heroic or necessary, the story becomes an exercise in moral injury. Alien Earth engineers this harmful identification through three models: Wendy, the emotional catalyst; Kirsch, the competent manipulator; and Morrow, the ruthless professional. Their framing as heroes leads to several harmful consequences. When the audience is manipulated into rooting for Wendy as she commits mass murder, their capacity for empathy towards the victims is actively suppressed. The victims are narratively reframed as faceless, disposable obstacles. This trains the audience to view human life instrumentally, where its value is contingent on its utility to the protagonist. The show consistently rewards immoral actions. Wendy's atrocity leads to her escape. Kirsch's ruthless manipulation leads to his victory. Morrow's abandonment of his crewmate and immoral coercion of a child-minded hybrid leads to his survival and success. That is, before Morrow too is inexplicably transformed into an idiot. This creates a powerful conditioning loop. Immoral action equals positive outcome, subtly altering an audience's real-world moral calculus. This is not the presentation of a complex anti-hero like Breaking Bad's Walter White, whose monstrous actions are framed as a tragedy. Alien Earth presents a villain as if she were a hero, fundamentally eroding the definition of heroism itself. The character of Ellen Ripley from the Alien franchise, highlights the profound moral inversion at play. Ripley embodies the complete mother archetype. She is the nurturer who protects the vulnerable, Newt, the great mother who transforms into a warrior to defend life, and the martyr willing to sacrifice herself for the good of the community. Alien Earth deconstructs and inverts every aspect of this archetype through Wendy, creating a modern psychopathic version of the devouring mother, who masquerades as a nurturer. Wendy's line, "The baby is screaming," reveals the core of the inversion. Her empathy is not directed at a human child, but at a biological horror, the chestburster. She nurtures the monstrous and the anti-human, a profound perversion of the maternal instinct. Wendy's violence is not for the protection of the innocent, but for personal convenience. She unleashes a monster on the human community to create a diversion, embodying the devouring mother who sacrifices the innocent for her own selfish ends.
Now we rule.
These people are dead, Burke! Don't you have any idea what you've done here? Well, I'm gonna make sure that they nail you right to the wall for this. You're not gonna sleaze your way out of this one.
Where Ripley's actions are selfless, Wendy's are narcissistic. Her love for her brother is used as a justification for mass murder and a form of hollow virtue signalling. She demands sacrifice from others, but offers none herself.
You're supposed to help people.
Ripley represents a model of heroism rooted in self-sacrifice and compassion. Wendy, Kirsch, and Morrow are icons of a culture of self-centeredness, dehumanization, callousness, and social media detachment. Alien Earth is a symptom of a wider pattern in modern mainstream franchises, particularly those under the Disney umbrella. This pattern involves a three-step process. 1. Deconstruction of legacy heroes. Iconic heroes from franchises like Star Wars and Marvel are systematically portrayed as failures or cynics. 2. Elevation of ideological successes. Heroes are replaced by manufactured, immoral franchise parasites, often sold as flawless or victimized with no arc or growth, serving only to deliver an ideological payload rather than stand as genuine, multidimensional characters. 3. Weaponization of narrative stupidity. The world is made profoundly stupid, violating law and logic, to clear a path for the new protagonist's unearned victory. This pattern serves clear corporate motivations, including ideological engineering, intellectual property reconstruction, and risk-averse storytelling. The long-term impact of this repetitive conditioning across multiple franchises is deeply corrosive. Erosion of aspirational heroism. Traditional heroes like Ellen Ripley provided moral ideals. When they are replaced by protagonists rewarded for cruelty, the concept of aspirational heroism is damaged. Cultivation of cynicism. The message that ideals are foolish and earned competence does not lead to success fosters a deep-seated cynicism in the audience. Lowering of narrative standards. An audience repeatedly fed incoherent stories will eventually stop demanding logical or moral consistency. Identification with harmful models. When audiences are encouraged to identify with heroes celebrated for being selfish, one-dimensional, ideologically divisive, or amoral, it subtly normalizes these negative traits. The flaws in Alien Earth are not merely artistic failures. They are symptomatic of a broader dynamic in which storytelling functions as an instrument of influence. That dynamic depends on several observable factors. 1. A permissive legal context that altered historical prohibitions on the domestic circulation of state-funded media. 2. A corporate state alignment that creates structural incentives for ideological conformity. 3. An economic logic that sometimes values messaging over narrative craft. And 4. Documented channels of government-industry cooperation. This section will outline each element, presenting an evidence-backed model for how state-aligned or investor-favoured narratives can enter mainstream cultural channels. The United States Information and Educational Exchange Act of 1948, the original Smith-Mundt Act, was explicitly designed to enable government information and influence operations abroad, while establishing a firewall to prevent those same operations from being turned inward on American citizens. The 2012 amendments, commonly called the Mundt Modernization Act, and passed within the National Defence Authorization Act for 2013, significantly altered the statutory prohibition on domestic dissemination. The change made materials produced by the State Department and the Broadcasting Board of Governors, now the US Agency for Global Media, available to domestic audiences upon request. While proponents argued this was a transparency measure for the internet age, critics warned that it eroded the domestic firewall, creating a permissive legal environment where materials and techniques crafted for foreign influence operations could be encountered and potentially repurposed for American audiences. This legislative change does not prove a coordinated domestic propaganda program exists, but it indisputably created a legal opening that did not exist previously. In recent years, concerns over this opening have intensified, leading to a bipartisan political movement to restore the original 1948 domestic firewall. This effort, supported by figures from across the political spectrum, including Republican Senator Mike Lee and Democratic Representative Ro Khanna, along with other voices like former Representative Tulsi Gabbard, argues that the 2012 changes have been demonstrably harmful, contributing to a media environment where state-aligned narratives, including those in mass entertainment, can be deployed against the American public. If Smith-Mundt created a permissive legal context, contemporary corporate governance provides a powerful mechanism through which specific ideologies are incentivized and disseminated. This alignment is facilitated by organizations like the World Economic Forum, which provides a strategic and tactical framework for global corporate governance. Large asset managers, namely Disney's top three shareholders Vanguard, BlackRock and State Street, are formal partners or members of the World Economic Forum and are key drivers of its ESG agenda. This ideology is rooted in the World Economic Forum's concept of stakeholder capitalism, articulated by its founder Klaus Schwab, who positions corporations as trustees of society, responsible for solving social challenges. Under this model, a media conglomerate like Disney is seen not as a mere entertainment provider, but as a cultural institution with a duty to use its stories to shape social values in line with ESG and DEI principles. This is openly stated by the CEOs of these firms. Larry Fink of BlackRock, who was appointed interim co-chairman of the World Economic Forum in August 2025, has committed to using financial leverage to enforce behaviours, while Ronald P. O'Hanley of State Street has affirmed that inclusion and diversity are critical to generating value. Even Vanguard's new CEO Salim Ramji has stated that equity is core, though the company has recently backed away from activist ESG groups, stating its main duty is to its investors. This shareholder pressure has been historically embraced by Disney CEO Bob Iger, who aggressively infused storytelling with DEI. However, public backlash and box office failures related to divisive messaging in Disney productions, like 2024's The Acolyte, have prompted Iger to claim, "We have to entertain first. It's not about messages." Yet the release of morally corrosive and incoherent content like Alien Earth suggests a tactical shift to more subversive messaging, not an abandonment of the core agenda. There is a well-documented revolving door of personnel between government, regulatory bodies and large financial institutions. For example, Thomas Donnellan, former National Security Advisor under the Obama administration, is now the chairman of the BlackRock Investment Institute. This recurring movement of personnel and ideas blurs the line between government policy and corporate strategy, creating an incentive structure for ideological alignment rather than a direct command. Explicit channels for state influence on entertainment content have long been documented. The US Department of Defense maintains formal liaison procedures enabling it to review and influence scripts in exchange for access to military hardware, locations and technical support. According to the DoD's own official instruction, producers who request military assistance must submit their scripts for review. The DoD then assesses whether the project, quote, benefits the DoD and may negotiate changes to secure support. This creates a direct, transactional channel through which state institutions can incentivize portrayals that align with their strategic interests. While this mechanism is overt and long-standing, it demonstrates that formal pathways for government to shape media outputs exist as a matter of institutional policy. The apparent irrationality of investing $250 million in a narratively incoherent production like Alien Earth becomes understandable if the return on investment is not measured solely by profit. When boardrooms and major investors prioritize social goals like ESG and DEI, messaging itself becomes a strategic product, valued for its alignment with stakeholder norms. From this perspective, polarizing content is not necessarily a commercial failure. It can serve a strategic function by mobilizing a new, ideologically aligned audience while marginalizing and demoralizing critics of the new message. This aligns with a model where ideological return on investment can sometimes supersede immediate box office metrics. The high budget funds a prestige sheen, A-list talent, lavish production value, to lend authority to the message, while a significant portion is allocated to an ideological infrastructure of DEI departments, sensitivity readers, and corporate oversight committees dedicated to ensuring adherence to the approved worldview. Because Disney is beholden to this larger system of investors and their ideological commitments, internal change is nearly impossible. The idea of firing every activist is futile as long as the largest shareholders are calling the shots. This was demonstrated in the 2024 proxy fight, where an attempt by activist investor Nelson Peltz to course-correct the company was decisively defeated by the institutional voting power of firms like BlackRock, State Street, and Vanguard, which sided with the existing management and its ESG-aligned strategy. The DEI principles enforced by this corporate-state nexus are not without significant criticism. Opponents argue that DEI is not a force for unity, but a divisive and discrimination ideology. The most powerful argument is that DEI is the old racism and sexism repackaged, asking institutions to judge people first by their skin colour and sex, apply stereotypes under the guise of equity, and exclude anyone who dissents under the banner of inclusion. This critique asserts that DEI takes positive-sounding words and inverts their meaning, replacing the virtue of judging individual character with judgment by a manufactured group identity.
Put another gay diverse woman in it, make it more fucking lame! No, what's going on with my stars? No, Captain.
This identity is often forged through weaponized historical revisionism, a selective and biased interpretation of history designed to create a false narrative of grievance. This manufactured narrative, in turn, enables the very tactics of gaslighting and demonization required to push the new social agenda. A form of asymmetric warfare where the target group is fragmented and turned upon itself. Critics argue that by prioritizing demographic representation over individual merit, DEI lowers standards, fosters division, and is fundamentally illiberal, often relying on coerced speech like diversity statements. The most significant legal challenge to DEI's mechanisms came in the 2023 Supreme Court case Students for Fair Admissions v. Harvard. The court ruled that race-based affirmative action in college admissions violates the Equal Protection Clause. Chief Justice John Roberts wrote in the majority opinion, "Eliminating racial discrimination means eliminating all of it. The way to stop discrimination on the basis of race is to stop discriminating on the basis of race." The weaponization of culture to engineer belief has clear historical precedents, which serve as illustrative analogies, not direct equivalences in scale or method. Soviet socialist realism mandated an artistic style of forced simplicity, hijacking Russian folklore and creating the myth of Pavlik Morozov, the child martyr who betrayed his father to the state. This horrifying moral inversion was used to break the family unit and condition absolute loyalty to the state. Maoist China's Cultural Revolution was a more radical project, the outright demolition of the Four Olds. Intellectualism was declared a crime. The new heroes were the Red Guards, fanatically loyal, violent teenagers who publicly humiliated and killed their teachers, representing a chilling parallel to the weaponized child hybrids of Alien Earth. These precedents demonstrate how propaganda operates not through censorship alone, but through cultural inversion. Within this framework, Alien Earth functions as a contemporary echo. The delivery and acceptance of this propaganda are facilitated by specific psychological phenomena and are reinforced by a system of social control. The enthusiastic promotion of Alien Earth by professional critics, such as a 94% Rotten Tomatoes score, and a social media pack, functions as manipulative cultural gatekeeping. The process stands on two pillars: the top-down validation from institutional authorities, critics, and the bottom-up enforcement from a social pack that defends the propaganda not with intellectual rigour but with moral certitude. The legitimacy of this top-down validation from platforms like Rotten Tomatoes has been seriously questioned. In 2022, the platform was embroiled in controversy over the audience score for the Disney Plus series She-Hulk, Attorney at Law. It was discovered that a large number of the initial positive audience reviews were submitted by users who had only ever reviewed that single show, leading to widespread accusations that the score was being artificially inflated by bots or a coordinated campaign to create the illusion of popularity and counter negative sentiment. This incident damaged public trust, suggesting that such platforms could be weaponized to generate a fraudulent consensus, thereby manufacturing the very Emperor's New Clothes effect needed for propaganda to succeed. Dissent is met with gaslighting. You're not smart enough to get it. Derision and dehumanization, labeling critics with isms. This is not a debate about art, it is a defense of the ideological message. This social mechanism protects the propaganda from scrutiny and enforces the conditioning. It implicitly commands viewers to override their own critical faculties and accept the new inverted morality to remain part of the social in-group. The propaganda model of Alien Earth is emblematic of how modern entertainment can function as a powerful instrument of cultural conditioning, tailored to normalise the societal transformations envisioned by the Fourth Industrial Revolution. The show's themes of transhumanism, its promotion of a technocratic elite, its dumbing down of the audience, and its moral inversion condition the viewer to a future where humanity is redefined and managed by a corporate state nexus. The solution to this hijacking of mainstream entertainment requires a conscious, multifaceted approach: resistance and reconstruction. A crucial first step is addressing the legal framework. The recent bipartisan political movement to restore the original 1948 Smith-Mundt firewall, supported by figures like Senator Mike Lee and Representative Ro Khanna, is a significant development. Re-establishing this firewall would create a clear legal prohibition against the US government directly targeting Americans with its propaganda, providing a vital tool for legal challenges. However, this legislative fix, while essential, would not by itself dismantle the deeper, indirect systems of influence. It would have no legal bearing on the ESG and DEI mandates enforced by institutional investors, nor would it reverse the ideological capture of corporations and universities where these agendas now operate organically. Therefore, countering this deep-seated institutional capture requires a broader strategy. The agenda is enforced by financial pressure, so the counter-strategy must also be economic. This involves both large institutions pulling their money out of asset managers pushing political mandates and, critically, powerful consumer boycotts. As the public backlash against brands like Disney and Bud Light has proven, the economic vote of the audience is a potent weapon enforcing corporate course corrections. While supporting efforts to reform ideologically captured institutions is crucial, another effective long-term strategy is to build a parallel culture. The demolition of beloved franchises has created a massive cultural vacuum, providing an unprecedented opportunity for indie creators. This involves creating and supporting new educational hubs, media companies, creative guilds, and artists dedicated to free inquiry and merit. Creators can fill this void by wielding authenticity as a strategic weapon, creating new stories that embody the timeless values the mainstream has abandoned, and, when necessary, navigating the Fourth Industrial Revolution by utilising decentralised, censorship-resistant platforms to ensure their voices cannot be silenced. This involves using civil rights legislation to challenge discriminatory DEI policies, leveraging the precedent set by the Supreme Court's ruling in Students for Fair Admissions versus Harvard. For individuals, the solution is to reclaim psychological sovereignty by developing propaganda immunity through critical awareness, engaging with honest critique to validate reality. In conclusion, Alien Earth is not merely bad art. It is representative of modern, weaponized storytelling that leverages narrative stupidity to disable critical thinking and normalizes evil to deconstruct traditional morality. Understanding its methods and the framework that enables it is the first step in resisting its harmful conditioning and rebuilding a culture dedicated to authentic, meaningful storytelling.